Whenever you raise a glass of water or something to your mouth, she will grab it and bring it to her mouth.
I'm glad you said water there, because Felix definitely had the grabbies for the Prosecco glasses and the wine glasses. Like, get his little fist around the stem. He's like, ugh! It's like, of all the things we're going to try, it's not going to be this.
It's not going to be that first. No. Maybe at 8 months. Yeah. She does it with wine glasses. She does it with, Jake's a fan of Guinness. She will do it. But doing it with the wine glass isn't the first anecdote I roll out, because sometimes I don't realise what company I'm in. You are listening to the Science Baby podcast with me, Kim.
And me, Leila.
We're two nerdy mums who have researched the crap out of parenthood.
Seriously, you do not want to see our Google search histories.
Each episode, we chat about the why behind pregnancy, birth, and everything that comes after.
Because babies don't come with a manual, but with one born every minute, we reckon we can figure it out. Hi.
Hi there.
How are you?
Yes, very well. Good. We've had a good week. Mm-hmm. We are 2 days away from our half birthday.
Oh my goodness, how exciting.
We almost have a 6-month-old, which is mental, isn't it?
That is terrifying. Well done. Congratulations on keeping a small person alive for 6 months.
Kept her alive for 6 months.
Yeah, and yourself.
Indeed. Well, yes, and also I haven't quite lost all of my mind. I think there are a few brain cells left. Everyone with a child 1 and over is howling, going, ha 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 ha. It gets so much worse.
It doesn't get worse. It changes.
Okay.
It always it just keeps changing. Do you get a medal?
I hope so.
No, you get to take on new challenges.
Oh, good. It's the whole thing of you do really well at work, you get rewarded with new unpaid responsibilities.
Yeah, until you get promoted to a position in which you are incompetent.
I don't know what you mean. I've never met one of those.
Never met one of those. No incompetent bosses in our lives whatsoever.
Sounds like parenthood.
It really is, yeah. But we're all doing it together.
Indeed. And have you had a disrupted week? Is that why you're tired, or are you just old?
I am old. I am very tired. Sleep's been off. I think we've got some brain stuff going on. Actually, it was really heartwarming. We went to a soft play, generally a place I try to avoid because they're full of children and I'm not a big fan of especially other people's children. But we went to a soft play inside a pub to celebrate a friend's birthday. That's the exciting thing. But for the first time ever, I actually witnessed him playing completely independently with other kids. And, these are kids that he's come up with, he's known since he was born. They were my antenatal friends. And I just sat, I watched, glanced, he was still in there, he was fine, there wasn't any screaming. And he was just so content to climb up and slide down and run around. And it was so heartwarming to see that kind of independent play. And at one point, I went and looked in through the window, and he was struggling to get up a step that was probably 3/4 his own height. And he was pulling and he was tugging, and his little friend comes over and goes, "Do you need help? Do you want a hand?" And he's like, "No, pushing." And I know for 100%, had I been there, he would have got frustrated, stamped his feet and gone, "Mummy, help." And I'd have to push his bum up. But he knew I wasn't there. He didn't think I was there. And he just kept trying. And I took a video, and it's a minute long of him on the struggle bus trying to get up this one step. And he did it at the end. It's oh my God, this is so exciting.
That's so cute.
Highlight of the week, Felix got up a step. But it just shows the level of perseverance. And it's the sort of thing that you, when they go to nursery, you wish that you could be a fly on the wall to see how they play. Oh. And this was perfect. It was absolutely ideal to just watch him just completely in his element. And he was having a lovely time. I mean, Felix is generally quite an independent kid, but he does prefer me to kind of come with him, but he stands on the sideline for a while and watches how the other kids play. That's traditionally been how he's started a situation. But today, at the soft play, he just went straight in, gung-ho, and he was like, "I own this place. I know exactly how this works. I've got it down." So yeah, it was amazing. It's really...
And he knows the kids, doesn't he?
He knew the kids he was there with, but there were loads of other feral children to join my own feral child, and he was happily playing alongside those and watching them. And the highlight was we managed to drink 2 bottles of Prosecco between us.
How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm fine. I haven't had a 3-day hangover. Absolutely no.
Oh, they hit different, don't they?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that's so cute. It's amazing when we have maybe 60 seconds of independent play with something at the moment, and it's glorious. But it is so crazy to get a little insight into them just existing without you being the centre of their universe.
Yes.
It's really cool to watch, is like what holds their attention and what are they thinking. And, you know, Stella sort of, she's getting these expressions on her face now where if she's playing with something or trying to figure it out, she'll furrow her brow like she's calculating something or experiencing something for the first time and isn't quite sure what it's about, and then she'll open her eyes really wide when she's like absorbing a new experience or a new sensation.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful.
it's crazy to watch those like flash across her face. Yeah, her world must be mental.
Yeah.
So Stella is going to be 6 months old on Tuesday.
That is so exciting.
So that is a couple of days from this record period.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not given her solids yet, but we are staring it in the face, figuring out what to do next.
How do you feel about it?
I am so excited. And the reason I'm really excited is because it's a new thing to do with her.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to see her experience this world for the first time. And I can't wait to see the look on her face when she realises, oh my God, I can put this thing in my mouth and it tastes weird. Because mainly she's really excited about food and drink. She's got such a strong grip strength that whenever you raise a glass of water or something to your mouth, she will grab it and bring it to her mouth.
Oh, wow. I'm glad you said water there, because Felix definitely had the grabbies for the Prosecco glasses and the wine glasses. Like, get his little fist around the stem. He's like, ugh! I was like, of all the things we're going to try, it's not going to be this.
It's not going to be that first. No. Maybe at 8 months.
Yeah.
You know, she does it with wine glasses. She does it with, like, Jake's a fan of Guinness. She will do it. But doing it with the wine glass isn't the first anecdote I roll out, because sometimes I don't realise what company I'm in if a health visitor's around.
Yeah, that's fair.
Water. It's water.
The water glass, yeah.
So, yeah, but she's gunning for it. This child is gunning for food, so I'm really excited to see her experiencing it for the first time. That's amazing.
That's so exciting.
And the reason I'm excited is because I haven't tried it yet, so I'm not yet viscerally aware of how much of a nightmare it's going to be. That's coming as well.
I just love it. I find myself in that really difficult situation of a parent of an older child, of like, I'm full of advice and lived experience, and I don't want to tell you what it's like because I'm excited to see how you experience it. But I think, I was so excited to try weaning with Felix. And for us, the excitement didn't last very long.
Yeah, I know.
I did like a fun baby weaning food shop. I got the books. I'd watched all the videos about all the baby weaning stuff. And to this day, Felix is not interested in food. He is not a food-motivated child, and I can say that now quite confidently without any shred of guilt or stress, because I understand that the child I have, personality-wise, just doesn't give a shit about food. I have no idea how he sustains himself. He eats like 3 blueberries and fresh air, or no, he's not that bad, but there's always something more interesting in his head than eating, which I can absolutely say he's 2.5, he's surviving, he's obviously having enough nutrition, everything's going swimmingly, but through those early months, good Lord, it was a struggle. Just a child who's not interested in food, trying to get him to eat. So don't be dispirited if that is your experience, because, I think if somebody told me early on that their eating personalities will even show at that early stage of like he could be interested in food or he could not be interested in food, that's absolutely fine. I might have been a bit calmer, but I was not calm. I was very stressed.
Well, it must be almost a second go at, trying to establish breastfeeding or bottle feeding at the start of their life, because you enter this nightmare of calculus and anxiety where you're constantly calculating, are they getting enough food, how many mil did they drink, how long did they drink for, have they got enough nutrition, blah 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 blah. And I imagine that weaning is a similar experience, because suddenly you're aware that not all of their nutrition is going to be coming from milk, and so you are constantly trying to balance that maths once again.
Honestly, I think we've talked about it before, I had a really tough time from 6 to 9 months anyway, and it's definitely contributed to my sort of panicky state of mind.
That is very true, because it must be confounded in the same way as every journey in parenthood, confounded by other stuff that's going on. If you're chilled in general, then you're probably going to be chilled about that.
Yeah, but chilled is not a word that could ever be used to describe me. No. I am about as far from chilled as it's possible to be.
That is why you're so successful. My other thing I'm looking forward to is I'm really, as much as I'm excited to see Stella experience food for the first time, I'm excited to see my husband experience the level of mess. He is a really incredible roommate because he's very clean. He doesn't like mess. He doesn't like clutter. He's definitely ahead of me on the domestic stakes. But his Achilles heel is that if there's mess, he has to clean it up immediately. And I can't wait to see him try and deal with what's about to happen.
My husband is the same. He glitches when his sock seam is twisted. If he steps in water, it is the end of the day. We might as well just give up on the whole day. If he's got a wet sock, then that's the end of the world. And genuinely, Doug struggled with the mess. And I could watching Felix eat, play with his food, and just he was glitching. His little eye was twitching, and he's just like, he's gripping the table like, I need to wipe this child. I need to wipe the table. And our phrase, which really helped, and I hope it might help with Jake, is embrace the chaos.
Embrace the chaos. It's part of the process.
It is part of the process. Leave it at least until the end of the meal. Allow as much rice on the floor as Stella wants to put there.
Okay. Right, so I actually come loaded with a question. I've been given 2 good directives, and I'd like you to help me choose between them.
Okay.
First directive is buy a shower curtain and put it underneath Stella's high chair, because that will catch the mess. You can hose it down. Job's a good one. Second directive is don't bother and just let the floor get mucky and then wipe the floor up afterwards, because to clean a thing is more difficult than to simply just clean the floor. Where are you, team curtain or team floor?
Team floor. Team floor all day.
Okay, interesting.
As long as you remember to actually clean the floor and then don't find a dried up piece of pasta several days later, far under the dining table, which has definitely never happened to us. No. Embrace the chaos. I don't know. You can actually buy specific things that go underneath the high chair, but I feel like the food is going to go everywhere anyway. If you think that a shower curtain is going to catch a exuberantly experimental child's food, then you're a little naive. Like, we've had yogurt up the fridge. We've had broccoli like tossed backwards into the rest of the kitchen. If you just accept that it's going to go on the floor and you're going to be cleaning the floor, then there is only one thing to do. Whereas I feel like if you have a shower curtain, when the food inevitably goes on the floor anyway, you'll be frustrated that you've got to clean 2 things.
Good advice. Good advice.
I would like to hear where yoghurt ends up.
What I'll do in the name of science, because as we said before, the only difference between messing around and science is writing it down. I will keep a running score of distance from high chair. We'll try and calculate some parabolas.
Yes, with age
food.
And food group.
Good point.
Well.
Yes. So we're having this conversation today because we're a couple of days shy of 6 months, and as a lot of people who've had kids in recent times will know, 6 months is the magic number when it comes to introducing your child to solids. It hasn't always been that way, and it may not stay that way. It seems to be a bit of an evolving thing, and you've done quite a lot of research on this, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I was really interested in it, actually, because I'm always very sensitive to the things that people tell me. I'm a very sensitive soul. But, you know, as you'll know, as a parent, you get advice, solicited and otherwise, from every quarter, from your peers, from your parents' peers, from the random people on the internet, and you can often get quite conflicting advice about when to start. And so, as an example, we got, not pressure, but from around 4.5 months, my parents were saying, are you going to try him with food? Have you got him a high chair? They weren't saying you need to do it. They weren't pushing it, but they were starting to ask, like, well, are you going to start feeding him? What are you going to offer him? And scoffing at the fact that I was going to attempt broccoli first and things like that. So I felt that kind of unconscious sort of pressure to start earlier, even though I knew in the common narrative that we should be starting at 6 months. And so I started to do quite a bit of digging into, well, why am I getting this pressure? What's everybody else doing? And why do we think the way we think now? And this is kind of the justification for this whole podcast, for my whole existence, of like trying to figure out why it is that we are weaning at 6 months. And I was actually really surprised to discover quite how much it's varied over the years. It's quite interesting. You say, you know, Stella's going to be 6 months on Tuesday, you said, and so it's like you're going to give her food on Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how is Tuesday different from Monday or Wednesday? Yeah. And so obviously it doesn't matter which day we start on, but how do you choose when to actually start? And as with all things, it's kind of guided by whatever the current understanding and preconceptions are. So it surprised me to discover that around the turn of the 20th century, babies were recommended to be entirely breastfed for a full year. So they wouldn't touch a scrap of food until they got into their second year, until they'd already turned 1. Which is wild. So no weaning whatsoever in that whole first year, which really surprised me, because obviously I've been being told to do it earlier and earlier, but for a vast majority of the time, they're probably not going to be experiencing any food whatsoever until they've turned 1, until their second year. They were recommended to have things like sips of beef broth at 11 months. And things like that as like an introduction. And as I understand it, the motivation for that was the understanding at the time that babies' digestive systems were immature. And, you know, they had a weak immune system, a tiny weak baby, cannot manage anything. And it's only when the baby themselves started to become stronger, crawling, walking, that they recognise, we have a stronger baby now, give him beef broth.
So it's like they're more vigorous.
Yes, a vigorous child needs nutrition.
Right.
Cook that child chicken. So then, basically, the modern world starts to happen, and through the sort of 1920s, 1950s, and the uptick of domestic sanitation and industrial food processes, actually the recommendation went way down, and they said, well, actually, we can make, you know, the scientists were saying we can make these easily digestible foods, things like, you know, processed grains and processed fruits and purees and your classic kind of baby food in a jar situation. And so the recommendation went right back down to sort of 4 months or possibly even before. So get that baby on food straight away, because it would give them more nutrition and help them grow. That's kind of the rationalisation of that. And I think because of that better sanitation in the home as well, there was less risk of them picking up anything nasty from unprocessed foods. Better refrigeration, better kind of cleaning and storing means that they're not going to be getting bugs from eating food. So that sort of lasted through into the 50s. And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, in line with the shift in understanding about the benefits of breastfeeding, once we started to realise the sort of the hidden responsiveness and benefits of breast milk over other foods, the push started to swing back towards keeping a baby on milk for longer. But at the same time, you've still got this more easily digested food that's available. And so there's sort of struck a balance somewhere between 4 months and 6 months of when you're going to start introducing food. And that lasted right up into the 90s with that quite big variation in when kids were weaned. And I think this is where my parents' pressure, sort of their thoughts came from. They were thinking that I was getting, you know, somewhere between 4 and 6 months, they started to sort of put some food in front of me or offer me jars of baby food and things like that, because it was the idea that I would be supplemented with extra nutrition as I was starting to grow. But then I think this 6 months that we are being told now, this 6 months to the day situation, comes from a World Health Organization endorsement of 6 months, which sort of puts into official recommendation that balance between the benefits of breast milk for the first 6 months and then bringing in the benefits of increased nutrition, especially things like micronutrients, things like iron in foods from 6 months onwards. And that's pretty much where we are now. But, you know, all of these health agencies, they endorse particular advice. But that's not to say that it will hurt your baby if you leave it a little bit later or do it a little bit earlier. But obviously it helps women who've never done it before, parents who've never done this before, to actually have something to aim for. So I'd say if you want to do it on Monday, just go for it. Go crazy.
Oh God, with any historical advice about parenting, there's so much to say about it. But, you know, I can fully understand our parents' generation who, or their parents before them, I can understand this impatience to get on with solids, because as we've said before, breastfeeding can be a right old chore. Formula feeding is a right old chore. Doing both is even more of a chore. And I think that there is this anxiety over, is my child getting enough food? So you can totally understand that, you want to get your baby onto solids and get them independent of your own supply, or, this formula supply as early as possible. But as you say, it is all about balancing benefits and potentially about, minimising harm.
Historically, one of the reasons that weaning was recommended to be later on was the concern that babies' digestive systems are immature. And that's sort of consistent with a lot of the things that we see about our horrendously underdeveloped children. They're neurologically underdeveloped, their body, their skeletons are still growing and fixing up the whole time. So it makes sense that throughout their first year, their digestive system is not going to be fully capable of dealing with a steak and a pile of raw crudité.
We live in very different worlds. Here's your kippers, love.
But this is one of the things I dug into, is like, how can they only survive on milk for 6 months and then all of a sudden they can take on a steak, kippers, whatever it's going to be? And it surprised me to learn that their digestive systems are not as immature as we might think they are. So the reason that a baby can survive on milk for its first 6 months, or even a year, it seems, is because actually they don't have that great a nutritional demand. Like we talked about the other week, they need a lot of sugar to help fuel that brain development. But in terms of muscle growth and literal energy for running around, they don't have that much need until later on. And so milk is a fantastic source of fats, protein and sugars in those early months. But that's not to say that their digestive systems can't deal with fats, proteins and sugars from other sources. And that sort of actually kind of makes sense when you think about it. So in our bodies, in our digestive systems, we have enzymes, which are basically like, I like to think of them as scissors that can chop up the molecules inside our food to make them small enough to go into our blood and to places that the cells can use them. And so we've got enzymes in our stomach, in our intestines, and we've also got them in our mouth. And actually a baby is born with pretty much almost all of the enzymes that it will have as an adult in lower quantities, but they still have enzymes that can break down fats and in proteins inside the digestive system. The thing that they're lacking is the enzymes to break down starches, things like complex starches like you'll find in bread and pasta, bigger carbohydrates. They're lacking those inside their intestines, but they actually still have them in their mouths, and we still have them. It's one of my favourite experiments as a science teacher, is if you chew a piece of bread for long enough, it will start to taste sweet, because the enzymes inside your mouth are chopping up the savoury tasting starches and turning them into sweet tasting smaller sugar.
Cool!
So it's literally, you're making sugar inside your mouth if you chew bread for long enough. So basically babies have still got enzymes that can break up all of the main components of their food. And so actually their digestive systems are not as weak and not as immature, underdeveloped as we might think they are.
So is it that the milk that they're on from early life, the breast milk or the formula, is it that that's so well balanced that actually the benefit of going on to solids doesn't really start to become significant until later on?
Exactly, yeah. So they are absolutely fine on their milk, but they still have the ability to digest all of the main food groups, but they don't actually need, like you say, the benefit of solids is not greater. But there are other elements of their digestive system that benefit from not having to deal with all of the complex molecules that you get in real food. So one of the big things is that their intestines are actually quite leaky early on, and that means that sort of big molecules are more likely to pass into the blood before they've been broken down, and that means that things like pathogens, viruses, stuff that really doesn't necessarily belong in food or in your baby's body can move through more easily earlier on. So in that sense, it's better to stick to breast milk or properly prepared formula milk that is less likely to have those nasties in them essentially, those larger nasty molecules, because your baby hasn't got the normal barrier that they then develop. And sort of as they grow, I like to think the intestines kind of like knitting together better. The cells kind of stick together better, and they provide a bigger barrier to sort of molecular nasties that are coming in.
That's so awesome. That is so cool, because a few episodes ago we discovered that breast milk naturally, after around 6 months, tends to include more immune factors in preparation for your baby potentially starting solids. I wonder if that's related.
I think it's all related, essentially. Yeah, so because the solids inevitably, and certainly historically, obviously, when you're dealing with raw and sort of imperfect prepared food, you're going to be coming across a lot more bacteria, viruses, parasites, that sort of stuff. And so as soon as your baby is having something other than just milk, they're going to be at risk of those things. And so we want to wait until their body is able to deal with it in terms of the actual physical makeup of their body, but also the immune components of their body and bloodstream as well. And then the other thing that recommends milk over food early on is their kidneys. So the kidneys are the kind of fluid filters of our body. So they take all the fluid that's in our digestive system and then our blood and filters it and gets rid of it and turns it into urine, basically. And babies do have quite underdeveloped kidneys, and so they're not able to deal with huge quantities of fluid. And so again, the great thing about milk, properly prepared formula or breast milk, is that it has the right amount of fluid to match your baby's kidneys' ability. Whereas if you are giving them things like apples or, fruits and things like that, those contain a lot of fluids and they can actually overload a baby's kidneys, and they're not going to be able to deal with that so well. And this is another one of these reasons why they say don't give your baby water on top of their milk, because their kidneys can't deal with it.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So like the idea being, of course, that breast milk or formula is already perfectly optimized in terms of the balance of water to electrolytes and other nutrients,
Yeah.
Okay.
So overall, the take home from that was that I was surprised to discover it's not because your baby can't deal with real food groups on the whole. It's just because they've already got what they need in milk, and you really don't need to introduce food until their energy requirements kind of start to step up and their energy and growth requirements start to increase and they get older. There
is some really cool current research going on that I found, all about the microbiome of the gut as well. This is something we've talked about. And, it's a fascinating colonization underway from the moment of birth. As the baby is fed, the very first colostrum and then a mature milk, they start to populate their gut with the exact sort of microorganisms that are optimized for the digestion of that milk. Of course, as soon as they start to eat solids, all sorts of new stuff starts to come in and colonize and compete, and one civilization will fall whereas another civilization rises to power. It's this whole thing, and that is, of course, in adults as well as babies, a huge area of study that is constantly being developed, in terms of our understanding of what's going on. It's a really active area of research, because we don't really know the limits of the impact on our future health of what's going on in our guts. But there are a few papers that we've seen that seem to suggest that early, diversification, if you will, of this gut microbiome may be linked to higher risk of certain illnesses like, diabetes or obesity in later life. Whether that's a very simple causal relationship or whether there's a whole minefield of stuff going on to get to that correlation, we don't know. But it's really interesting that research is happening and looking at how the gut microbiome changes during this transformative period, and the timing of that seems to be very important. Time will tell, as science does its thing, which is super exciting.
I'd be interested to see if the recommendations change again in light of that kind of research, if we ever get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, the research that I've seen and seems to have been done more recently is, kind of very early introduction, so 3 months and earlier. So it seems to, at the very least, bolster the validity of the recommendations that we're currently working with, waiting till 6 months. But yeah, it's interesting to acknowledge that there may actually be a safe lower limit as well, established, as this picture becomes clearer.
Part of why this needs talking about is because, as you say, every baby is different, and 6 months to the day doesn't work for every family. And there's got to be a little bit of wiggle room. And so it helps to know a little bit of the basis for that wiggle room and things to look out for. Ultimately, it's not 6 months to the day that matters. It is what your baby is interested in and capable of that is the thing that matters. And so I would say that it's somehow even sort of 6 months is the guide when you should be looking for when to do it. But more important are, what is your baby's sort of behaviour and ability around food.
There are certain developmental things that you need to look out for to make sure that your baby is ready, because obviously the one caveat with everything we're ever going to say ever is that every baby develops at their own pace.
Every baby's different.
The advice I was given explicitly this year was get her to 6 months, then monitor for these signs. So you're over that generalised milestone, and then you're monitoring for your own baby's level of readiness.
It's interesting because I had a similar thing, but it was not reach 6 months, it was more around 6 months. And so actually we ended up offering broccoli, and I've got the funniest video. He had no idea what to do with it. We offered broccoli in his little high chair. His little head is just above the table at about 5.5 months. And as previously mentioned, he was not interested in it whatsoever and continued to be uninterested in it for several months. But it didn't stop us keep trying. And I think that there was a lot of value in that as well. But so again, you said explicit advice said get to 6 months. I didn't have that advice. I don't think any of them are going to actually be affected by the particular timing, as long as those readiness sort of markers are kind of in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's potentially down to individual healthcare professional as well. They all have their own experience and interpretation. So shall I take you through my little checklist?
Yes, please.
So the three things that I'm looking for. First one is she actually gives a flying sausage about food, which she started doing at least 2 months ago.
Amazing.
So basically they've got to want to eat food, otherwise there's no point. And then this is probably one of the most important bits, is that they have to be able to support themselves in a posture that is safe and means that they can manage their swallowing and their airway with the right amount of muscle tone that's going to make it safe. So we're told they need to be able to sit up, mainly unsupported, with good head control, crucially. And this is the one that we haven't quite got yet. So she's got really good head control, but she's a bit like that when she sits up.
So she's sliding over sideways when she's sitting up.
Yeah. So, and it's hilarious. Don't get me wrong, it's hilarious, and I'm not in a rush for that to end. But but that is one thing we're trying to train at the moment. Just get her to get a little bit more strength in her core. In her high chair, she's very stable. So I think we're really close.
Yeah.
But she doesn't quite have the core, hip, upper back business going on yet. She's sort of still a little bit like a sack of spuds. But and that's all to do with, of course, just having the right muscle tone to be able to hold yourself in a posture where you're not going to send something the wrong way. If you try and eat your dinner upside down, it's not going to end well.
Oh, can you tell that to my feral 2-year-old, please?
Well, there's always that. Exactly. And also, upstream from that, can they actually grab something and put it towards their mouth? Some can't. And in order to be able to eat at a safe pace for them, they need to be able to manage that themselves.
Yeah.
Did you mainly spoon feed Felix at the beginning, or did you let him grab stuff?
We opted for a combination of both, just so that he could get used to a whole variety of different textures and ways of eating, and just to get him interested in different ways of eating. So we did definitely do a combination. Obviously, you're not expecting them to hold and properly orient a spoon or a fork in the early days. If they're handling a spoon by themselves, it will be upside down and the yogurt will be on the fridge. But they should be, if you're doing sort of baby-led weaning, which there's a lot of support for out there in the literature, they should be able to hold a carrot stick, for example, a cooked carrot stick or a cooked potato stick by themselves, just to have that grip strength in their hands. But from the sounds of it, she's definitely got the grip strength to do that.
Oh, yes. Maybe too much. The last thing is that I didn't realise that one of the many protective reflexes that babies are born with is the tongue thrust reflex, so called, which basically is the reflex that when something goes into the mouth, they immediately thrust their tongue forwards to get it out. So that's not useful. It's very useful for protecting them against choking, but not that useful when they're trying to direct food to the back of their mouth in order to swallow it. So we need to wait until that reflex has diminished before they can successfully swallow. And my understanding, and you can set me right on this, but my understanding is that it isn't necessarily dangerous that they, constantly push stuff back out. It's just that the reflex is still there. So, give it a couple more weeks and see if it's diminished enough that they can now swallow. Yeah. Did you go through that with Felix?
A little bit, yeah. I feel like when we saw the tongue thrust reflex from Felix, it wasn't particularly strong, but it was kind of sort of a rounded tongue pushing out towards his lips, essentially.
Okay.
And it wasn't a particularly violent reflex, but it would push a spoon away, for example. It was already diminishing once we started weaning, but it would sort of push against a spoon rather than bring it in. But yeah, I'd imagine it is protective, and like you say, it's not dangerous. Trying to feed your baby whilst they still have their tongue thrust reflexes just means that they won't be able to take the food into their mouth and swallow it.
It's not a good use of your time.
It's really not. You're just wasting your time.
It's already hard enough.
So yeah, I think the uprightness is quite important, because obviously there is sort of an immediate choking, breathing, hold it kind of posture issue. So that is something you want to keep an eye on, but it's something you can keep an eye on with your child right in front of you. Just make sure that they are maintaining an upright position. But obviously if they can't consistently do that, then again, it's a waste of your time to literally just hold them in place. So you want them to be able to have a measure of independence when you're doing that. So that's kind of the most important thing. If you do it too early, you'll be able to see quite quickly whether it's going to be profitable to continue or whether you should take a little break. But I would recommend just putting food in front of them and sitting them down at the table, because a lot of it is that kind of socialisation of eating as well. And that comes on, that is something that it's really important to keep that consistency with, of like, well, this is the time that we sit down to eat. And it helps you as parents, I would really say this actually, it helps you as a parent to normalise the routine of actually feeding solids, because it's so different from milk feeding. And this is one of the things that I struggled with. I was never very good at sitting down at the table and eating at appropriate times. We were always, because I commuted, I worked away quite a lot. I was a snacker. We never sort of sat down a lot. But it's so important for kids to sort of sit down and have time with their food. So that's another thing that's really important to sort of set in stone at the beginning. We're sitting down with a plate, and it sounds so simple, but I think a lot of people, whether they're sitting at a TV or they're just grabbing going, early on it really helps to have that routine and that tradition, if you like, of sitting down with your food and having time with solid food.
Yeah, even though Stella isn't on solids yet, we've tried wherever possible to establish that routine with her. So situate her in her high chair, with us at the table. Because again, we also are serial snackers. We live in quite a small house. We don't have the space that would make it easy or comfortable to sit down and have an evening meal at the table every night. So we're also quite guilty of kind of grabbing stuff on the go. But yeah, we're, as you rightly say, we're trying to establish that, because otherwise, we'll get to weaning day and she'll find herself in her high chair with these two jokers at this massive table that she's never seen before, going, the hell am I supposed to do with this? What's going on? And she's going to be so confused that she's not even going to look at the food in front of her, and it's going to be a nightmare. So yeah, we've sort of tried, not massively successfully, but she sort of knows at least what her high chair is, and the fact that she has this surface in front of her that she's a bit confused by still. So it's such a good point.
Yeah, in those early months, food is not for nutrition, it's for experience, absolutely for experience. And anybody embarking on a weaning journey will probably hear the same thing about, try lots of different foods, fruits, veggies, within the recommendations of cooking and preparing it properly. Let them get hands-on, literally, with loads of different textures and colours. Let them play with it. Let them put it to their mouth. It really doesn't matter if they're chewing, swallowing and eating a full plate's worth. If it all ends up on the floor for 6 months, Jake, Kim's husband, this is a direct message to you. If it ends up on the floor, if every meal ends up on the floor for 6 months, she is still doing amazingly, because it's about being exposed to foods and figuring out what takes their interest, what tastes they like, what textures they like. Felix has only just come around to rice. He has hated the texture of rice for 18 months. No, 2 years. Have we been out of food for 2 years? Oh my God. Oh, where does time go?
Time flies when you're having fun, hey?
For nearly 2 years, Felix has not tolerated rice. But now he loves it. So, things can change.
Part of this process of experimentation that she's about to undergo is, as much as anything else, about establishing a stress-free, positive relationship with the food, right?
Totally.
So if you're going to get stressed out about them getting enough nutrition from day one, they're going to be very suspicious of food, because they're going to think, Mum and Dad are really freaked out about this and seems to behave really negatively when I'm playing with it, which is my only instinct at the moment.
And if I were totally honest, I think that my stress has contributed to Felix's kind of antipathy towards food, because I've never been chilled about it at all. And it's been a real internal battle to try and tell myself, it's fine, it doesn't matter, he's not going to starve. And I literally, on a weekly basis, I have to remind myself and my husband, he's fine, he's not going to starve.
Yeah, but also he is also fine now, and he's not going to be off food all his life. No. So you need to be kind to yourself and understand that you were in the situation you were in mentally and physically, and you did the very best you could with the resources you had. It's like holding a spider. Mind over matter's fine, sure, pal, but I'm not going to hold a spider and go, oh, isn't that wonderful? I'm probably going to be quite worried about that situation.
It's an interesting comparison.
I think the main thing, you will, I'm sure, be able to sympathise with this. The main thing everyone's worried about is choking. This tiny little thing that can barely even reach for a flipping toy, suddenly having to manage the process of swallowing without killing themselves is a whole thing. In terms of natural selection, we humans as a species, thanks to the wonderful architecture of our throats that give us this voice so we can communicate and work together as a species and become this superpower on planet Earth, makes us very choky as animals. Yeah, which isn't the best when you're trying to swallow food. So our larynx is relatively low down in our throat. So the larynx is the thing that has the vocal folds and makes excellent noises as we inhale through them or exhale, la la la. So that is quite low down in our throat. And one thing that gives us is it gives us the ability to create a whole variation of sounds. And of course, as we know, the openings to the trachea, which we breathe through, and the esophagus, which we eat down, they're in really similar places, and they have this kind of shared space above. And then we have this flap of tissue that flaps in and out in order to close one but open the other. So it protects our airway as we swallow, stops food from going down into our larynx and down into our lungs. So with our larynx being lower down relatively compared to other animals, it just means that there's more space for food to go down the wrong way. So it's just easier for that to happen. As with a lot of things, we have this evolutionary trade-off where we do have to sort of manage our airways while we're eating, and it makes infants, and incidentally older people who have lost muscle tone quite vulnerable in this situation. So it is something that we have to watch out for, and is probably on every parent's mind, that this is the one thing we think about.
Choking is, and continues to be, just one of those things that you're just constantly on the lookout for. It's all about essentially how you prepare the food, and you've got to, it's one of those cases where you've got to trust your child with their own mouth parts to some extent, and that's really hard because you are not in control at all, and you've just got to kind of let them figure it out, but be watchful. There is a really good app that I've used throughout our weaning journey, and this is not an ad at all, but it's a really useful and accessible app that tells you when it's a good idea to introduce different foods and how to prepare them as well to avoid choking at different times. It's called Solid Starts.
Yeah, I'm using it at the moment.
Yeah.
Because it tells you by age, which is
exactly
cool.
Exactly, and because it does it by age, you can keep on going. We still use it even now. I'm like, well, how on earth am I supposed to prepare a mango, for example, the slippiest food in the world? And what do I need to tell my mother-in-law about how to cut the grapes? So, things like that. But so that is a really, really useful tool if you want to err on the side of caution in terms of choking risk. But, if the general way to think about it is anything kind of tube sized, any tube diameter foods, especially ones that are perfectly circular, are a bit of a no-no. So make them smaller.
Cut that cross. We were told cut that cross section. Don't make it round.
Don't make it round.
Quarters are excellent.
Make it long and thin. And even today, Felix got something down his air tube that should have gone down his food tube. And Doug's like, oh, take a drink. And I was like, let's make sure he's breathing first. Because this is the thing. This is the one thing, again, I wouldn't imagine that we're actually saving any lives, but it helps to remind ourselves choking is silent. Because when they're choking, no air can come out. So if they're like gasping or coughing, they're fine. But choking is silent, so you want to look out for a lack of breath and a very rapidly blue lip, and then you can give it a big whack on the back.
Yeah, and this is why, of course, we're all told don't leave your child alone when they're eating, because they can't call you for help if they're in trouble.
Exactly, because choking is silent.
It's interesting because I wasn't weaned for quite a while because my mum was so scared of choking.
Oh wow!
Because I struggled when I began, and I would be interested to know whether I actually did have a little choke or whether I was just struggling to manage food, because gagging is a very common,
so common,
and not necessarily dangerous part of learning how to manage solids. But the difference that I've been told is that that's not silent. That's scary sounding, but crucially not silent.
No, exactly, yeah. We get gagging all the time. They've got very sensitive back of throat nerves, and Felix can make himself sick just from coughing or crying because his gag reflex is so high.
The other thing that we're thinking about, of course, is really cool, is helping her body start to understand allergens. And this is also a big part of the science of weaning, is, small amounts of allergens can be we now understand, can be very beneficial at this age to kind of prime her body to not have an inappropriate response to them. And there is some research that under very, very controlled conditions, it may be appropriate to introduce your child earlier than 6 months to certain allergens, because if that child is at high risk, say maybe to a family trait or something like that, if they're at high risk to, say, a peanut allergy, your doctor may recommend introducing them to very small amounts earlier than 6 months, because that's quite new research, I think, is they've shown, there was a paper that showed that you can decrease the incidence later on of peanut allergies,
because that's part of an overall movement with sort of allergens in general. Whereas historically parents were encouraged to avoid certain allergens in fear of an allergic reaction. The common advice now is to actually include those allergens in your early weaning food choices, not just to see if there is a reaction, to be watchful for reaction, but also to, as you say, build up that exposure and build up potentially a resistance to things like that. And like you say, there's a lot of research that's going on. It's quite interesting that they say, introduce it earlier.
I think that's a very case-by-case thing.
Sort of medically supervised thing.
100%. The advice that I've heard is do that process of introduction early under the guidance of your doctor and advised to do so by your doctor as well. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think if you don't have a high risk of developing allergies, then sort of that introduction to allergens would all be part of your normal weaning process from 6 months. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be trying a new allergen every week. I think that's kind of the average thing.
Fun. Allergen of the week.
Boom. I got AI to write me an allergen plan.
Interesting.
And you know what? One of them was really catty with me, actually.
Really?
I can't remember which one it was, but I asked an AI system to give me a meal plan for a 6-month-old with appropriate introduction of allergens, and it gave me a curt response saying, I'm not a medical professional, I won't be giving you any dietary advice.
It could be curt, or it could be, erring on the side of caution. I'd have taken that.
Yeah.
To be fair, you're not. You are a large language model trained on emails from the 1980s. So I'll trust you on that.
Touche! Yeah, no, absolutely. I may have been in quite a rush and a little bit stressed at that point, which may go some way towards explaining my reaction. That's it for this week's episode of the Science Baby podcast.
When did you start your weaning journey, and how did it go for you?
And if you have any tips or tricks for weaning, I would love to hear them.
Join the chat on Instagram, or you can find this and every podcast on our website, thesciencebaby.com.